Your support helps us bring you programs you love. Go to wyomingpbs.org, click on Support, and become a sustaining member or an annual member. It's easy and secure. Thank you.
8 years ago, Citizens United prevailed in a Supreme Court case against the Federal Elections Commission. Citizens United called the triumph a victory for free speech. Many across the country, including Wyoming Senator Al Simpson and members of a group called Wyoming Promise, say it was a victory for anonymous and dark money to be funneled into our election system. We'll examine the issue of campaign finance reform and how it relates to Wyoming, next on Wyoming Chronicle.
Funding for Wyoming Chronicle is provided in part by the Dragisevich Foundation, supporting the work of the Wyoming Women's Foundation.
Has the Citizens United versus FEC ruling already impacted political campaigns in Wyoming, local, county, state, federal, and can you give
Oh yes, I believe they have. And they picked some very glorious sounding names. Used to, have the Constitution or liberty or justice or freedom or America or whatever, or equality, whatever. And they're not bad people. They're not, but they're getting injections of money that you and I don't know where it comes from. It's there, and it's real. And they use good names, and they go to the hearings, and they hire good people. They hire people who are smooth and sharp and hang around the legislature and take you to dinner, and nothing new about that, but you don't know what phantom background they have and who is the money behind them, because there certainly isn't the guy giving $5 from Gillette or $10 from Powell. That's not where they're getting their money.
And our thanks to Senator Al Simpson. We've now gathered members of the steering committee of a group that's called Wyoming Promise to further explore potential campaign finance reform. And with me is Ken Chesnick. He is the chairman of Wyoming Promise. Welcome. Lynn Horton Morrison is the vice chair, and Shelby Shadwell is the treasurer of Wyoming Promise. To all of you, welcome to Wyoming Chronicle.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We've heard from Senator Simpson, but now I want to hear from you. Tell us, what is Wyoming Promise, Ken? And let me begin with you.
Wyoming Promise is a grassroots organization of Wyoming citizens who have seen that we have serious problems with money in politics, that we need to solve that problem first. So we are working to get a measure on the Wyoming ballot that would basically say we call for a constitutional amendment to allow for meaningful campaign finance reform.
And you're not talking about amending Wyoming's Constitution, of course. You're talking about amending the United States Constitution.
Yes, we need to amend the U.S. Constitution to overturn a United States Supreme Court decision from 2010, which basically says corporations are people, money is speech, because that's an interpretation of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The only way to overturn that decision is to amend the Constitution to say just the opposite. Corporations are not people, money is not speech.
Lynn, what motivates you? Why is this an important issue for you to be a part of?
I was pretty disappointed in the presidential election process, and I felt that it was really the first time, I think, in my life that I realized that if I'm going to change something, I need to be more of an activist. And I just see a lot of money, huge amounts of money going into politics. I wasn't as aware until I started reading up on the Citizens United decision, Supreme Court decision of 2010, that Ken already alluded to, that basically said that corporations are people and money is speech, and it essentially wiped out the Campaign Finance Reform Act, and it makes, you can't run unless you have enormous financial backing.
Shelby, how about you? What is it about what's happened recently that's made you become involved in what Wyoming Promise is trying to do?
Absolutely. I am involved with this issue and this cross-partisan issue. I'm not Democrat or Republican, I'm interested in this issue because it is at the foundation of all the other issues. We can't make headway on something like the privatization of our public lands and those efforts unless we solve this issue. For me, it affects the state of Wyoming and our public lands and our access to public lands here in the West and in Wyoming specifically. And until we get some meaningful change and campaign finance reform, our legislators are going to keep listening more to the donors and what the donors want, as opposed to what the citizens want. And this is on every issue.
But isn't it the case, I mean, your goal is not to prohibit money to enter campaigns, and large donors could still influence. Isn't the issue you would just know who those donors are? Isn't that the crux of what it is you're wanting to talk about?
Yes, it's the transparency issue that's so problematic. There are currently some limitations on how much individuals can give, but there's no limitation on how much a corporation or a wealthy donor can give to a super PAC. It's the dark money super PACs that we have no idea who's given this money to these groups, where these groups are finding their money. They're spending tons of money, mostly on negative ads, attacking people, attacking candidates many times by lying about them, and that money is not accountable. We don't know who is giving the money, and so transparency is the main issue, the main reason why we want to do this. In theory, international donations from foreign entities are illegal, but in practice, it's hard to enforce that because we have super PACs.
And multinational corporations.
Multinational corporations, all the energy companies that I'm sure are donating lots of money, but they can donate that money anonymously through a super PAC. We'll never find out who they are, and that's primarily what we're trying to accomplish with this amendment and appropriate legislation from Congress and putting it into effect. By transparency, super PACs make it not transparent, and if we can get rid of the super PACs, we can help enforce the ban on foreign money.
Shelby, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I was just going to say the corporate climate these days is very different than it was in years past. Again, these are large multinational corporations. They're not housed solely in the U.S. by any means. And to reiterate what Lynn was saying, we're not against corporations in any way, shape, or form. They're a great tool, economic tool. They're just not a good political tool. Their speech has the ability to drown out the voices of average citizen.
I want you to respond to this. Reason.com said this. Citizens United, by underscoring a right to pool resources for political expression, has made it much easier for politically engaged Americans to influence the political process. Single-issue activists, mad-as-hell millionaires, business and labor groups, cats and dogs all now have more power to make their voices heard in politics without having to seek government approval or coordinate with major parties. Has there been any spin-off in your eyes that's been positive with Citizens United versus the FEC?
That's a great question. I'm stumped.
I would say no. I don't see any benefits to this. We all had the power to speak our minds and reach out to our representatives before Citizens United, and we were doing just fine with that. What we're seeing now, though, is this money gets concentrated, and it's for issues that are generally not as popular with the American people. When you have something like an issue, for instance, gun background checks. Even, Second Amendment rights person like myself, I want reasonable background checks. 90% of the American population want that. When we're in a situation where Congress is not doing anything about that, we don't live in a democracy anymore.
So let's talk nuts and bolts. You have goals that you need to reach, and you have deadlines that you need to reach. How are you coming along in your process, and what is it that you actually need to do to get this to the Secretary of State, to get this on Wyoming's ballot?
So in order to be on the Wyoming ballot, we need to have 15% of the registered voters sign petitions saying we want those on the ballot, measured by the last general election. That number for the state is 38,818. That number is burned into my brain, that we need to get that number. And it needs to be diverse all over the state. We have to get certain numbers from a lot of different counties, so we can't get them all from one or two counties. If we get that number by February of 2018, we will be on the ballot in November of 2018. However, if we don't get enough by next February, we can still go through next spring and fall and summer, and then get the number that we're going to need, and we'll be on the ballot for 2020.
Our viewers are now looking at the actual proposed amendment language.
Yes.
When you come up to people who may not be familiar with Citizens United, who may not really have contemplated campaign finance reform, Lynn, what do they say to you? What do you say to them?
Well, I think the first thing is educating people in Wyoming about the Citizens United decision, that it was a 5-4 decision by the Supreme Court, and that it stated that corporations are people and money is speech. And one of the things I point to in the Act to Promote Free and Fair Elections that we have already filed with the Secretary of State is I point out that the first two comments that we have in that act quote the Wyoming Constitution. Thank you. So I'll just state it right here. The people of the state of Wyoming hereby find that the Wyoming Constitution provides that in their inherent right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, all members of the human race are equal. And Section 2 of the Wyoming Constitution provides that all powers and franchises of corporations are derived from the people and are granted by their agent, the government, for the public good and general welfare, and the right and duty of the state to control and regulate them for these purposes is hereby declared. So the Wyoming Constitution is really stating that it's the right of the people that are dictating what's going on with corporations and the founding of corporations, and now it's turned the opposite way. And so when I start to describe that to people, people understand more.
If I could just follow up, that Article 1, Section 2 is the Wyoming Promise. The promise that equal rights are guaranteed to members of the human race. Those words are in the Constitution, members of the human race. Corporations aren't there. They're not humans at all. That's the Wyoming Promise.
Shelby, what do people say to you when you approach them and say, sign my petition?
Very often I get a great deal of support. I do also speak about the Wyoming Constitution and how, Citizens United is directly counter to what we came up with in Wyoming. And I think, and most Wyomingites I speak to are amenable that we got it right here, and they're interpreting it wrong.
I think some people perceive this maybe as a conservative versus liberal issue. Do you view it that way?
Absolutely not. We have gotten a large amount of support all across the political spectrum. We have Republicans signing it, we have Libertarians signing it, Democrats, everybody. Nationwide, you do polling on this issue, and it usually comes in around 80% of people across all parties say this is the right thing to do. This passed in Montana by 75-25, and in Colorado, 75. You don't get those kinds of numbers from one party only. It's a bipartisan thing. It affects all of us equally, and that's one of the reasons I'm doing this work. Number one, I like the idea, the issue itself is huge, but the idea that this is bipartisan, that we can work together on something. It's so important to me to be able to try and mend some of these polarized discussions that are happening everywhere. Let's work together on an issue that we can agree on. And this is something that we clearly do agree on across the parties.
So can so many states need to do and have success in what you're doing in order for Congress to consider the issue? What's that number?
So the number is 34 states calling for a convention of states. So there's two ways to amend the Constitution. One, Congress can propose a language, or two, a convention of states can propose a language. So far, 19 states have called on Congress to do it, but that's not binding. Congress can ignore that. Congress cannot ignore a convention call. And so far, 5 states have called for a convention of states. And we would be the 6th to call for a convention of states. If 34 states call for a convention of states, Congress must call. There's no option here. Congress is required to call a convention, and then the convention would propose the amendment.
Why wasn't this more of an issue in the Obama administration? And I'll add to that question, do you perceive it will become an issue in the Trump administration?
Yeah, I do like what President Trump said on the campaign trail about draining the swamp, for one, and also calling out politicians at the national level for basically getting bribed by large donors. He mentioned Hillary Clinton. He had given her some money in the past, and they went. She asked him to go to a wedding or something like that along those lines, and he did. And he really called that out, and I think that was great. I'm just not seeing any action from the Trump administration at this point on this issue. I would love to have seen the Obama administration or any administration, really get onto this issue, but they're within this system. It's a systemic problem.
Do you have any support or any perceived support from Wyoming's delegation at this point?
No. We have contacted all of our congressional delegation, all three of them, and received no response from two of them and a vague response from Senator Enzi. So we don't have any direct support from any of our congressional delegation. We will be in touch with them as we go forward and keep trying to get them on board.
Are there any ways the Wyoming legislature can impact this issue?
Yes, the legislature can adopt this act that we're proposing. We actually did go to the legislature last January and proposed a different version of this. It did not include the Article 5 call for convention of states. We just asked the legislature to call on Congress to do it, and we got a little ways down the path and got it through the Corporations Committee, but it died for lack of priority, I guess. And we may try again. So if the legislature wants to do this, we'd be happy to have them help us out.
Is it your perception that dark money makes its way into local politics in Wyoming?
Absolutely does.
Give me an example. You talked about the public lands debate.
Yeah, so in a couple of ways. There are groups that are pouring money into the state to fund our representatives' campaigns. And a lot of times we don't know where that money's coming from. It could be national organizations. Again, a lot of it's dark. A lot of it's coming from PACs and super PACs and things. And talking with legislators and our representatives, they'll admit that. They'll say there are groups that are trying to influence both sides in the state.
I wonder if the window of opportunity for this is closing, and we talked a little bit about this off camera, but I want to talk about it now. Time magazine covered this article extensively last August. And they said this on the Democrats are following Republicans' lead by raising millions of dollars in so-called dark money contributions, the origins of which are largely untraceable, and we've talked about that a little bit. Let me give you the statistics quoted in the article. In the 2016 election cycle, special interest spent $183.5 million in dark money compared to $5.2 million in 2006. Liberal interest spent $41.3 million of that money, or 22.5%. Again, a massive growth for both Republicans and Democrats in the last 10 years. My point is that is there the political chutzpah to continue with this when both Democrats and Republicans are perceiving benefits from raising this kind of money?
The parties may not be making this a priority, but the people are. And this is a people's revolution. We talked at the very beginning that this is a grassroots movement. I do believe that in both parties there's some resistance to this issue where it's hard to get it through Congress, it's hard to get it through any state legislatures, because the people who depend on the money are the ones we need to vote to get rid of the money. So it's not working that way. It has to work through the grassroots, and that's exactly what we are. We're a grassroots organization, and that's how it's happening in other states, and it's going to happen here too.
Is it a daunting task to you, though, that since 1993 Congress has considered 1,000 constitutional amendment proposals? All of them have failed.
That's daunting, and that's why our petition, we have added, we're not just asking Congress to do it, we're asking for a convention of states, and that is the lever that's going to hopefully get this across the finish line when enough states ask for a convention of states, which Congress cannot control. Once Congress sees it's losing control, then Congress will probably act. That's the idea.
I'll add that it took, I think, over 200 years for the 27th Amendment to finally get passed.
And I'll also mention the 17th Amendment, direct election of senators. That's one that was also dealing with corruption in the political system. Our senators used to be basically appointed in by state legislators in smoke-filled rooms with bags of cash being traded back and forth. And people said, we need an amendment to the Constitution to stop this corruption. And they got within 1 or 2 states of calling for a convention of states, and Congress at the national level said, hey, we better pass this, we better do it ourselves. And so it's about pressure. It's about putting the pressure on our national representative.
One more topic that I want to talk about that I think has been less discussed. It seems to me candidates themselves, and even political parties themselves, are having less control now over their own messaging. Is that perhaps give you some light that maybe candidates might begin to understand that they aren't really as able to push their own agenda as they are dark money's agenda?
So our representatives at the national level spend between 40 and 70% of their time dialing for dollars as opposed to doing their job of public policy. And the ones that I've actually interacted with or spoken to or written to or heard their stories, a lot of them don't want to be raising money. They want to be doing the people's business. They want to free up all that time to do it. And a lot of them are just sick and tired of it. And what you get are folks at the national level that are particularly good at dialing for dollars, but not necessarily at doing the public's work.
Let me add an anecdote to that as well, a personal anecdote. I was a candidate for the Wyoming legislature in the last cycle. And I was running a very clean campaign about here's why I think I'm good for this district. My opponent was doing a very good, clean campaign, why he thought he was good for the district, and it was very up above board. It was very clean and done the right way. A dark money group that I had never heard of before decided to send a flyer around to everybody in the district, basically misrepresenting my opponent's view, completely misrepresenting his view, and I got accused of lying about my opponent. I had nothing to do with it. I didn't know who this group was at all until it came out. I lost control of my message because I spent the next couple of weeks going around saying, no, my opponent does not believe what this flyer says, and I had to spend my capital trying to go back to the clean campaign that I wanted to run. So absolutely, dark money is in Wyoming. It is on both sides, and it can be harmful to the message of the candidates.
As we conclude our discussion here today, what are the biggest hurdles in front of you? What do you perceive as your biggest challenges? Is it time? Is it resources? Is it both? It's
both. Yeah, it's getting the volunteer representatives in each of the counties, because we need to have at least 16 of the 23 counties to have that 15% active voter registered threshold to sign the petition. So, there are, as a former governor, Democratic governor used to say, Wyoming is a small town with long streets. And so going out into the state and getting those signatures, I think, is one daunting task. But that doesn't mean that when you have something that is difficult, that you don't marshal all your resources to be able to affect change, not with something that's this vital. And I think both Ken and Shelby have demonstrated how vital this is to our democracy.
And as the treasurer, I will say, we disclose our donors, and this does take money to get this campaign going. We have to print the petition packets and things like that, and we're on a shoestring budget, and we don't have giant donors or corporate donors. So what we're looking at are small amounts of funding from Wyoming citizens, and we always ask for $28 for a 28th Amendment, and we just want citizens to donate that way. But it's been a challenge to raise funds in this time.
Ken, go ahead.
If we had 1,000 donors give us $28 each, we'd be fine. We'd get this done. We haven't had that yet, but we're getting there. We're making a little bit of progress. And as Lynn said, it's not so much getting people to agree with it. People, when you present this to them, they sign the petition. It's really very easy to get people to sign. It's just getting enough people with petitions on the streets, walking around, knocking on doors, and that's the hard part.
38,000 is a big number in Wyoming.
It is.
people want more information, the website's the best place to go?
Website's the best place, www.wyomingpromise.org, and there's all kinds of information there. If you want to volunteer your efforts, you want to make a donation, you want to learn more about us, there's a lot of information on the resources, the volunteer resources tab. Look us up and find out more about us.
Well, Ken Chestick, Lynn Horton-Morrison, and Shelby Shadwell, thank you so much for joining us today on Wyoming
Thank
Chronicle.
you.
Thank you.
The reason why Wyoming Promise was so important to me was because I felt I would have a chance to participate in United States history. I'm a volunteer with Wyoming Promise, and when I approach people, frequently they are very eager to hear a little bit more about a 28th Amendment to the United States Constitution, and they're also concerned about how much money is being dumped into our elections and campaigns.
And the reason that I became involved with Wyoming Promise is because I am concerned with the process in our government at this time, and the political process especially, which I think excludes a lot of citizens from participation. We have a huge task before us because we need to acquire the signatures of 35,000 people in Wyoming, and these are registered voters, and it takes a great volunteer effort to reach all the registered voters and to get their signatures.
The reason why the 28th Amendment is important for Wyoming is because the Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court in 2010, in effect, without any Wyoming individual being able to have a say, excised part of our state constitution. Because in the state constitution of Wyoming, corporations are regulated, and corporations are not treated as people.
I co-chaired the Wyoming Business Council with Dave Friedenthal for approximately 4 years. And I saw a lot of corporate influence inside of politics in the state of Wyoming. And it wasn't always good information, good consulting, good movement in the right directions. We, as a state, have got ourselves in a situation, both economically and socially and demographically, that is going to be very difficult for us to solve. And we need to take some real steps in the right direction, which is getting people engaged in what we are and who we are and what we want to be. And it can't be made around money.